Hello, hello. It's Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. If you are here for the live premiere of this, the live stream, let me know if you can see me and hear me in the chat box. Great to have you guys here with me. Today's topic, listen, dude, your technical skills, your ability to mix, your ability to record, your ability to produce, that is only 50% of the equation. Actually, possibly it's less than 50% of the equation. Once you get to a high enough level, once you get good, once you get competent, you really need to work on stuff beyond your technical skills. You can have amazing technical skills as a musician, as a producer, as an engineer, as a mixer, and you can still fail to do good work, and you can still fail to have a sustainable career. You can still fail to have a genuinely fulfilling, gratifying hobby if you don't get your soft skills together, your people handling skills. Because let's be honest, all of us at some point in our lives have felt spiteful or resentful or jealous of someone. We're like, man, that guy's not as talented as me. They're just an average musician, but, they have like a network or whatever. Or you might say, yeah, they're not really that skilled. They just know the right people, or they're just really good at schmoozing. And when we say these kinds of things, which all of us have said to ourselves internally at some point over some person, right? Let's be honest about that. Let's also be honest about the fact that a lot of that is just cope, as the kids call it these days, that a lot of the times when we get mad at someone who seems to be doing well but doesn't deserve it because they're just good at networking, or they're just a brown noser or a schmoozer, often those people are good enough. But they have this additional skill of people like being around them and like working with them. And that's actually extremely valuable. It's especially valuable when you're trying to make art and you're trying to be on the same wavelength with people and you're trying to do creative things. We can't undercut this idea of not just doing well with the tools and the sounds, but doing well with the people around us. Because if you are not a high quality person in the way that you socially interact with others, you're not going to surround yourself with a lot of other high quality people. And you're generally not going to do work that's as good, because honestly, at a certain point, most people who get really good at something eventually realize the same thing that I'm telling you. And they start working on their soft skills, how they're getting along with other people, because they realize that the path to getting where they want to go with their careers in music, or even just as a fulfilling hobby in music, requires them being good with people. And if we're not good with other people, they sniff that and they say, this guy could be a bummer to be around, or he's not selling me, like he's not making me feel confident about working with him or her. So they end up not working with us, and we end up potentially missing out on some of the best work we could be doing, some of the best projects that we could be doing, because we've only dialed in our technical skills. And I'll tell you how important this is, because careers of producers and engineers have started, many careers have started, because they were annoyed at how bad of an experience they had in the studio. This might happen less today, but if we go back a generation to people who are even slightly older than me, you wouldn't believe how many producers and engineers who I've met, who are probably in their 50s or so now, who I've interviewed, who are doing high-level work, who told me, Justin, the reason I got into this whole thing is because I was in a band and we went to a studio to do our first album, and it just sucked. Like, the guy looked down his nose at us. He was like a jerk, not fun to be around, wasn't like into the same music we were, wasn't getting our aesthetic. And I was like, I never want to have that experience again. And I don't want anyone else to ever have that experience again. I'm going to figure out how all the stuff works to take power away from that D-bag and be a good person to hang out with in the studio, and an understanding person for my future clients. So, really big thing to understand soft skills. And we're going to go into not just this idea of, I'm not just going to beat you over the head for, half an hour or whatever with saying you need to get better at handling people. We're going to go into some actual specific actionable ideas about how you can implement this in your life and immediately change the results that you're getting with people. Because when I started to figure this out, the number of clients that I booked And the quality of those clients started to go up tremendously. And I'm not saying that I have this perfect. In fact, I am not naturally good with people, I don't think. I am potentially a little bit too brash, a little bit too honest. I am willing to tell people things they don't want to hear. Like right now, this whole podcast episode is me potentially telling you things that you don't want to hear. And there's a lot of like weird things about me that honestly, thanks to everyone for putting up with me. And if I ever succeed with people, it's because like I'm taking that tack of like, thank you for putting up with me. I know that I'm weird. And that I think is rule number one about starting to suck less with people and starting to have better reactions, of coming to the whole enterprise of dealing with other people, no matter who they are, from the perspective of gratitude. Because so many of us, myself included, have been at a point where we're working on mixing something or mastering something for some clients, and it's not up to our standards. And we start to think in this holier than thou way of, they need me to save this project. They need me to polish this turd. Man, this stuff sucks so bad. If only they were better musicians. And when we come at things with that attitude, it stops us from being able to discover what's good inside that project and make it better. And it stops us from being our best selves, the kinds of people who our clients refer other clients to. So I want to tell you right now that we're a few minutes in, and all the people who are tuning out already, I can tell you the thing that I'm scared to tell you, which is I'm going to recommend a book. It has one of the cheesiest titles in the history of books, but it absolutely 100% changed my life in my 20s. And I would say it probably doubled my income within a year from reading this book that took, I don't know how many days to read. I probably read it in like 2 days. And this book kicked my ass. 100%. Have you ever had a book kick your ass? Like, those are the best books. And that book is this one. I just bought another copy of it today because I have another copy and it's in a box somewhere. I moved to this house and I haven't taken all of my books out yet. And shame on me for not rereading this book. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. How's that for a cheesy title for a book? But oh my goodness, if this book won't kick your butt. And I like to refer to this book by its other title. I think the real title of this book should be How to Be a Decent Person for Dumbasses, or The Total Idiot's Guide to Not Being a Total D-Bag. Like that should be the title of How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is all stuff that maybe should be common sense, but isn't. And we'll go over some of the ideas in this book. But just to let you know how profound this stuff can be, after reading this book, it totally changed the way I interacted with people for a few months, and all of my interactions with people were way better. And then I started slipping back into bad habits again, and I had to reread it. And for a little while, I tried to reread it like once a year. And I think I've internalized enough of the stuff in there where I'm like, oh, I don't need to reread it once a year anymore. And what I started to do for this episode, I was originally going to do just like basically a synopsis of this book. And this episode is going to be called How to Win Fans and Influence Gatekeepers. And I started thumbing through it and say, let me pick up all the main points and I'll just recap them for you. And I started reading and it started kicking my ass again. And I'll tell you, reading this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it just made me think, just like the first time that I read it, of all of these missed opportunities and botched opportunities where I could have just been a better person. Because here's one of the lies that we tell in particularly entertainment industries. And that's that nice guys finish last, that the people at the top are all jerks who cut throats to get their way up there. And I will tell you, at least with production and engineering, that is 100% not the case. I have interviewed over the past more than a decade some of the best producers and engineers in the world, working on some of the best records. I mean, so many big names: Manny Marroquin, Tony Maserati, Michael Brower. I mean, the list goes on. I can't even begin to count how many of my favorite producers and engineers working on big records I've spoken to personally. And every single one of them is like a decent person who's like easy to deal with. No prima donnas. I mean, the only thing close to being a prima donna I've gotten out of anybody were some of the higher priced people who we've tried to get to do presentations for MixCon. The only prima donna thing is that they cost more than others because they know that they're worth more and that their rate is higher than the average. But just requesting the rate that you can get on the market is not being a prima donna. There's no prima donna attitude with it. These are people who are in a service industry. And honestly, even if you're a super duper high level producer and engineer, you're not going to get repeat clientele only on the majesty of your name. You're going to have to get it by being able to interact with people in a way that makes them want to keep coming back. Now, maybe there's a couple rare exceptions here. Maybe you've met a prominent producer or engineer or mixer who is a jerk to you. And you're like, it's not true because I met this one guy who was a jerk. And maybe that person was a jerk. And maybe that person was the kind of person who's a jerk down, but not up and across. And that if you were their client, they might not have been a jerk to you. But there's also a difference between being a jerk and being confident. And there's also a difference between being nice and being a pushover, which is something that we have to talk about a little bit in this episode. I want to see if I can make this one a little shorter than the average. On these podcast episodes, I've often been going an hour. I'm going to try to keep this one to a half hour because I'm supposed to film another video after it. And I want to see what kind of formats people like best. But to be honest, some of the most popular podcast episodes we've done now have been an hour long. Some of them have tens of thousands of views. And once I get started on a topic, I want to keep on going. But I don't want to be repetitive and I don't want to take too long. So I want to get into the meat of this. I'm going to tell you a couple stories from my personal life, and then we'll get into a bunch of principles. The average YouTube video would have ended by now, right? There would have been like 10 minutes of B-roll over this, and there would have been like 150 edits. But this is live, baby. This is how actual people are. If you want to learn soft skills, interacting with people in their natural form, and being like okay with that and interested in that is extremely useful. So 2 stories I want to tell you. First story, before I read this book, where I landed one of my first clients and did a lot of things wrong, but did one thing right from this book that I later discovered that carried me through. The very first project I ever got hired to produce, I was still in college. And it was a bunch of other people who had graduated college who were slightly older than me. I was in my early 20s. And I saw this band play live. And I thought they were absolutely amazing. They were called Hotels. No one's ever heard of them outside of like Seattle, Washington. And even there, most people haven't heard of them. But brilliant musicianship. And man, I still don't like the way the first record we did together sounds. It got kind of ruined at the very end of the process. Some of the later records that I worked on, I think, came out way better. But I somehow convinced these people that me, still in college at like 22 years old, should produce the record. And I didn't charge very much. But I remember going in there, I saw this band, absolutely amazing. And I went up to them afterwards and I'm like, that was awesome. I get your music more than anybody else. You guys are going to work with me. I'm going to go into the studio with you guys. And you're going to make a record with me. It's going to be awesome. And that's kind of like brash and arrogant. And like, that was totally my approach. My approach was super brash, super bold, super cocky. But somehow I landed this client anyway. And I've got to tell you, just working with that first client, I'll tell you that literally dozens of other clients came off of just landing that first client and being a reasonably good person to work with. Like I ended up working on future projects of literally everyone who was in that band. And they each went on to have many other future projects. And then band members in those future projects booked me for stuff. So just doing that one cold approach after a show got me tons of clients going forward. But what really won me that client was not my confidence and my brashness. Although for this particular person, it didn't totally drive him away. But it was being sincere in praising them. And not in an ass-kissy and flattery way, but just in a totally honest way where I was willing to be complimentary, make them feel important, and make them feel like I understood what they were doing and trying to do. So that's one big thing. But the other big thing is that I knew a lot of people who knew members of that band from just networking with other musicians and just having a lot of other musician friends who thought I was decent enough to be around. So they'd probably heard of like, oh, this is Justin guy. We'll introduce you to him later. So it wasn't a totally cold thing. And just having enough social skills to know a bunch of people who were connected with them helped me land that gig, which I was probably underqualified for, to be honest. I didn't believe I was underqualified. I thought I was overqualified. I thought I was God's gift to audio engineering at the age of 22. And now I listen back to some of the stuff I did that I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, I would school you, kid. Huh. Thought you were hot shit. My goodness. But I think there was that coupling of, one, being really genuinely interested in them and like thinking that it was good and telling them so, number one, coupled with number two, from a place of confidence. And having behind that, A, social proof, and B, some degree of demonstrated ability. At least a degree of demonstrated ability that I could fool people into thinking that I had. But I want to tell you about an approach I had much later on that's much closer to my approach today and much more like the one that I would recommend that you take today. These were some mastering clients who weren't sure if they were happy with their current masters and were thinking about paying someone much more to do the masters, that person being me. Someone had basically charged them, I think, a couple $100 to master their entire album. They had been referred to this person by the person who recorded and mixed their album. And I heard it, and I have to say it definitely didn't live up to my standards of what I would have done to the album, and it sounded nothing like this artist's favorite records. To give you some context, some background, this was like a folk duo, acoustic guitar, voice, and they liked really warm, full-bodied sounding records where the guitars are so almost woody and a little bit muted and softened in the top end. And their final mix and master sound absolutely nothing like that. It sounded like a really bright 1990s indie record with like super extra sparkly acoustic guitars. And it wasn't necessarily bad for that style. It was just a complete cross purposes with what they were trying to achieve. And here they were coming to me, someone who was going to charge them close to 10 times more to basically redo the masters for them. And they wanted my opinion. And I gave them my opinion. And my opinion was, hey, this mix and this master actually isn't that bad. I get that you don't like it. What they're trying to do here, if you liked these kinds of records, this would be a master that you could live with. There might be some tweaks around the edges, but I think the problem is that that isn't the kind of sound that you're going for. And you want something that's a lot woodier, a lot warmer, that sounds more like these other records. And they ended up, even though they didn't have a huge budget to do music with, they're like, yes, we're going to pay you 10 times as much to do this. And halfway through that project, one of the reasons they told me they booked me for this is because I didn't insult the guys who mastered and mixed the record. Like, I didn't go in there trying to say, they did a crap job. They could have done way, 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 way better. They totally did you wrong. You shouldn't be with those losers. Get out from me with those losers. Come with a hero. Ditch the zeros. Be with a hero. Come to a real professional, and I'll master this thing for real. If I had done that, there's actually a good chance that they in particular would have run screaming. Or they wouldn't have run screaming. They would have actually just not talked to me. Walking quietly away is how actual adult human beings with social skills usually interact with bad situations. But that was something that I totally got from this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. There's a story in here that stuck with me about, I believe it was a person who was selling trucks, and he was selling the brand White trucks I think they're still a brand today. This book was written like the 20s or the 30s, so all of the examples in here are super old school. Like there's examples from like the railroad industry and stuff. It's not what you'd expect, but honestly, removing yourself from the world of audio makes it so much easier to digest the principles because they're much less emotionally loaded than if we were just hearing stories about Elton John and whoever, you know? I don't know why Elton John came to mind. Ozzy Osbourne. Interesting one. We're not going to talk about social skills and Ozzy Osbourne. That would be really interesting. I don't know how he communicates with people through all those mumbles. Now I'm making fun of somebody, which I shouldn't do. We all love Ozzy Osbourne. But in this story, a guy was going to someone's office who had a big fleet of trucks, and he was trying to sell them on his brand of white trucks. And the guy said to him, I don't buy white trucks. I buy Who's It trucks. They didn't mention the brand for real in the book, but I buy Who's It trucks. You can't get me to buy one of those white trucks. These are the best trucks. And the guy trying to sell him on the white truck said, you know what? Who's It trucks, they make fine trucks. You'll never go wrong buying a Who's It truck. And his sales prospect was totally taken aback by this idea. Like, what? You're not going to tell me how they're terrible? That I made an awful decision and that I'm like doing terrible things with my life? It's like, no, there's so many pros. Let me tell you the good things about their brand of trucks. And he's selling them on the brand of trucks he already has, not his own. And then the guy naturally asks, well, okay, well, what's so different or good about yours? And all of a sudden there's an opening. But the big thing that comes up again and again in this book, it sounds so simple. This whole episode is just going to be like, be nice to people. And we will in a second go through there's basically just a handful of principles in this book. And something else that's going to be revealed here is that it's not just about knowing the principles. It's about hearing principles through stories that emotionally resonate with you to change your mind and to change your life forever. And that's what I try to do with this podcast. Is that I'm really not interested in giving you a list of 7 tips as quickly as possible with like little chapter markers where you can read the title of the tip and then be like, yeah, I read that, I know that, okay, yeah, I know that, okay, I know that, okay. And then you leave having gained nothing and having your life changed exactly by 0. Because most of the time, what's standing in your way between where you are now and where you want to wind up is not some tip. It's about fundamental principles that you've probably heard before that haven't stuck into your brain like a spike yet. And that's what we're going to try to do in today's episode around the principles that are in this book. One of the most difficult things about this book, when you go through it, is it almost seems like it's asking you to be too nice. And if you're anything like me, and you're slightly disagreeable, and you're willing to tell people the truth, and you're willing to be honest and sometimes blunt, it's going to like stick in your craw like, ugh, I feel like such a like fake and such a butt kisser if I'm trying to be as nice as you're telling me to be. But it's not really telling you to do that. It's telling you to be honest. So let's go through some of the principles in this book. And this whole second half of the episode will be about not just me convincing you that this is important, but looking at actual actionable things. Before we do, the only thing I've got to do is give the briefest of shout outs to our sponsors, who include Lewitt microphones. I'm actually speaking into a beautiful new pure tube microphone from Lewitt. And actually, I can get you one of these for free. This microphone, if you go right now to sonicscoop.com/contest, this mic, we are giving one of them away. This is like, I think it's more than a $1,200 microphone, but it is probably the lowest noise tube microphone out there. And I like the sound of it. You're hearing it right now. And it has this little bit of a upper mid-range push and a little bit of a high frequency push. It's really tailored for vocals. But just the build quality on it is absolutely gorgeous. There's all these great little innovations in Lewitt, like this little magnetic pop filter, which I absolutely love. And I'm looking right now into the glowing tube of this microphone. Just the build quality on this thing is insane. If you want to check it out and possibly win one for free, go to sonicscoop.com/contest, where you can potentially win one of these mics. One of the other big things that we have going on right now also is Sound Toys sponsoring this podcast. And right now they have a big sale going on. It's 40% off of their plug-in bundles, 50% off their new Superplate plugin, and pretty much everything that they make is on sale. Some of them for as much as 70% off. And these guys make some of my favorite plugins. If you haven't tried them out, go to soundtoys.com where you can try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. And last quick mention is the most important sponsor in this podcast, which is you. How do you sponsor? By checking out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs. They are guaranteed to change the way that you work forever or your money back. If anyone's there in the chats or comments and has found these courses helpful, let people know, because I think they're the most useful things that I've ever done. You might also want to check out becoming a member of this channel. Click the join button down below. And if you do that, you'll get entry into this month's mix feedback session, where we'll give you specific details on exactly what and how things can be, what can be improved in your mix and how. So for instance, like exactly what you'd want to change about your vocal processing or your drum processing or your overall mix balances to get closer to the sounds of your favorite records. There's also a monthly live Q&A session, a whole bunch of free videos, and guaranteed answers to your comments from me. All right, let's get back into this. I'm going to pull up my little summary here to this book. And there's really 4 sections in here. And the first one is about the fundamental ways to deal with people. And there's 3 major principles. Each of these principles has its own chapter. And the first one is hard for a lot of us. The very first chapter is don't criticize or complain. Man, this is so important in the studio. Like, literally don't criticize people's performances in the studio pretty much ever. Now, once you've gotten really advanced with social skills and you know how to not criticize people and you know how to not complain about situations, you can possibly break this rule maybe sometimes for a specific effect. And in the end of the book, they talk about ways to break this don't criticize rule. But the whole thing is front-loaded with just hammering you with stories that are going to make you feel bad for literally every time you've ever criticized anybody. The second major principle for generally dealing with people is appreciate people sincerely and show appreciation for people. Like, say out loud, give lavish praise to people. And this does not mean flatter people, lie to people, and just tell them things that they know aren't true about their skill set. But what it means is that in every interaction where you're working with an artist or a prospective client, find out what's good about what they're doing. This is not only going to help them like you more, but it's going to help you like them more and you get their music more. And it's going to help just make the process more pleasurable for them and for you. If you can figure out what it is about this project that you like, even if it's not your favorite type of music, or even if this particular artist isn't as skillful as you'd like, or even if this producer who you're mixing for didn't record things or produce things as well as you would have liked, you have to focus on what's good inside of it and be willing to say it. And then the third big thing is when you're dealing with clients in this kind of client service industry, and just in general, speak to the people appealing to their interests rather than your own interests. And these are the 3 big ideas in the first whole part of this book. To not criticize people, not complain, to show verbal appreciation for things that you like about what people are doing, and to appeal specifically to their interests, how you can help them, why what you're trying to do is to their benefit. Because honestly, no client really cares about whether or not this record is a great calling card for you. They have their own interests in making this record and what they're going for, and you have to be able to interact with them and speak. If you want to get your way, to show how your way is actually their way. And then there's other ideas later on in the book about not forcing people to accept like you had the answer and that like you had a good idea, but almost like let them think that your best ideas are their ideas. Like, what do you really gain from having the person that you're dealing with say, "Oh yes, you're the great one. Thank you so much. You gave us this great idea. We'd be lost without you." You get a little temporary ego boost, but does it make the record sound better? Does it make this record more of a future calling card for you? Does it make the client's experience better in the end? If that praise comes back to you, great, wonderful. It would be awesome if everyone read this book and everyone was doing this stuff. But even when people aren't following the principles in this book, you do them anyway. And you just still be like, try to be a decent person. All right, there's a whole second section, which is about quote unquote, making people like you. And the reality is, you can't make anybody like you. But there's a few behaviors that none of us do enough. And they're so simple. And this is why lists suck and why this book is good. Because I'm going to list out the principles for you, and it's going to seem so obvious to you. You're going to be like, why are you telling me this book is so great? These principles are obvious. The reason this book is great is because there's stories in here that make it painful to you that you haven't been doing these things. So here are the things that are encouraged in this book to make you more likable. Number one is to show a genuine interest in the other person. You know that thing that we do when we're talking to other people where we bring up a topic so that they can start talking, like we ask them the question, we get them to start talking, and then we're just waiting our turn to talk? This actually happened to me this morning. I was doing a jiu-jitsu training session with a friend, and I was asking, he was telling me that he was lifting weights every morning. I was like, "Oh, what's your lifting routine like these days? Like, what are you doing?" And he started telling me about his routine and his gym that he goes to and what he likes about it and all this stuff. And I listened to his story, and I had this temptation the whole time of like, can you shut up so I can tell you about my lifting routine? We all do that, right? And that part was going on in my brain. And I just decided not to. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I might have added on, like one little additional thing, like, oh, if you love that, here's something else that you might like to try. Oh, you've been getting into kettlebells and doing these movements. Here's one movement that really helped me with my jiu-jitsu game. Trying to be helpful instead of being like, oh, now I get to talk and tell you all about what I do and how I do things and what my successes have been lately. This is not to say you should never do that, but one of the ways to get people to like you is to be genuinely interested in them and to not make the conversation into a back and forth where they impress you and you impress them. And there's just this constant tit for tat of trying to one up each other. Like there's a time and place for that among people who already like each other. You can get away a lot more with people who already like you. My father has one good quote. Now, I don't know if my father's a very quotable person, but he had one good quote that's always stuck with me. He said, Justin, you know what a friend is? He said, a friend is someone who knows all about you, but likes you anyway. Man, I don't know if I can think of a better definition for a friend than that. But most of your clients, at least right now, at least when you start interacting with them, are not yet your friends. They're not people who know all about you and like you anyway. And especially when you're in the client service area where it's a privilege and an honor and a source of income to be working with these people, you should show more of a genuine interest in them than you expect them to show a genuine interest in you. And I think this is one big thing that I tried to do as a mastering engineer. And this is not to just get something from them, but it helps my work as a mastering engineer go better. If I ask them, what are some of your favorite records that you've been loving the sound of lately? I ask this of every single one of my mastering clients. I want to know what great records sound like to them, because I can get a list of favorite sounding records from one client, and they're way brighter than the list of favorite sounding records from another client. And another client's favorite sounding records have way more reverb than others. Like, it tells me about what good sounds like to them. And my goal is not to enforce my biases for good onto them, is to try to figure out like what they were going for and how to help them get there. And I think particularly if you're on the producer or engineer or collaborator end, that's what you should be doing in all of your interactions. Figuring out what those artists and collaborators you're working with are really trying to get and express, and help them get there better. So that is likability issue number one. Show a genuine interest in the other person. Number two, you're going to hate me for this one. It's in the book. I didn't write it down, but it's true, and I don't do it enough. And it's smile. Oh my goodness. Do you know how much it helps to just like smile at some people sometimes? We don't notice sometimes when we're like really in technical mindset, we're staring at a computer and our brain's being sucked out through our eyes into the screen. We don't recognize what our faces look like. We don't take a moment to step back and like live in our bodies, but smiling is something that your body does that changes your mind and changes the minds of people around you. It's remarkable. The same exact word said with and without a smile can come across completely differently. Like if someone's being a little bit rude to you and they're not acting on the principles in this book, one thing you could say is, excuse me. But another thing you could say is just, excuse me. And there's so many subtle variations in how the voice sounds. For those of you who are listening to just the audio-only version of this podcast, without seeing my face, you can hear the difference between excuse me and excuse me. Now, sometimes forcing too much of a smile, that was almost like an angry smile. You can almost hear that tone in people's voice of, oh, that was angry smile more than happy smile. But actually taking a moment to smile at people, even if it's subtle, and not just walk around with resting bitch face, as they call it, all the time, super useful skill. And the reason we're doing this episode is a little bit inspired by the end of a Q&A session we were doing the other day for our members only. We were going into the idea of soft skills and dealing with clients and how to have better client reactions. I'm not going to mention by name the two members who asked this question because I want to keep the specifics of their questions private, so I won't mention them by name in this case. But one of our members was saying, I'm autistic, and man, do I have trouble sometimes interacting with people. Having a book like this is great, even if you are not Asperger's or autistic, and you just have a disposition of like normal crotchety audio guy. Like doing this stuff is like a manual to how to be more likable. And it's not me just saying, dude, smile more to your clients and prospective clients. It's having stories to back it up. So I really recommend the book. All right. Number 3 for likability is say the person's name. Do you ever notice when you meet new people, either they or you almost always say that thing of, oh, I'm so bad with names. What was your name again? I'm so bad with names. I just met a guy named Ed yesterday, and I was like, hey, Ed, how are you doing? Good to see you, Ed. And he was like, oh, I'm so bad with names. What's your name again? Justin. I don't care that you don't remember my name. But it like genuinely makes people feel bad for a moment. Not like you're making them feel ashamed, but like they wish they knew your name because they kind of know how powerful that is. And we often don't make a big deal about it, but one of the sweetest sounds to people's ears is their own name. It's very rare that I hear people call me Justin to my face. Very unusual. I mean, my wife calls me babe. My daughter calls me dad. It's very rare for me to interact with people day to day who refer to me by my first name, Justin. And it's like so infrequently that sometimes I forget that's my name. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like I don't associate myself with being that name because people almost never call me that. And this is another thing, like if you take a moment, my favorite way of doing it is find a way to work their name into a sentence 3 times. And I can immediately say, "All right, good to meet you, Ed. Oh, I know another Ed. My cousin's an Ed. Is yours short for is your Ed short for Edward, or is it just Ed on your birth certificate?" Like, whatever. You find 3 ways to like use it rapidly while you're looking at their face and maybe have some type of association. Bam, they stick. No one, I think, is naturally good at remembering names. It's an acquired skill. And when you meet someone again later and you haven't forgotten the bass player in the band's name, and you immediately call them by their name, even though there's like 5 or 6 names for you to remember and only 1 name for them to remember, there's just a show of respect there that somehow in a subtle way lends to likability. The other major things around likability, we have to start going faster on these now, are number 4, listen well. Encourage other people to talk. I do a lot of talking in this podcast. You can tell that I clearly don't mind the sound of my voice that much, right? Because I can speak extemporaneously for an hour and like I don't get tired. But this is not necessarily how I'm in conversation with real people. I don't just monopolize a conversation. And honestly, one of the reasons that I can speak relatively well, and one of the reasons I'm good with the English language relative to the average person, is that I listen a lot. And I think that this is a superpower, listening and encouraging others to talk. Man, the things people will tell you if you listen to them, remarkable. I have had people tell me stories that's like, I can't believe you're telling me the story when I just met you. I don't say that out loud because nothing in my demeanor expresses that. People confide things in me surprisingly quickly and early. I remember I was literally getting my tires changed the other day, and the guy behind the counter was telling me the story of how his father passed away a few years ago after they had a pancake breakfast at a sugar house, and how he slipped into a seizure and a stroke and then eventually dementia after that. And I got to learn about the passing of his father while we were doing an exchange to change my tires on my car. And I said to myself, this can't be how most people go around living their lives. But there's something about the power of someone who really seems like they're listening to you and the words that you're saying register, that people just like want to confide things in you if they really get the sense that you're not judging them. Like, I'm saying it in a slightly judgy way now because I'm trying to paint just how odd this probably is. And he wasn't talking this way to the other people who are in line in front of me or the person online after me. And this is not to brag, because I don't know if there's something to brag about, but it is to show that if you genuinely listen to people without judgment and with just seeking to understand how they think and feel, they will trust you and confide in you. And it's hard to do that unless you are actually a trustworthy person who people can confide in. And that's one of the big things about this book and the lessons in it, is that you can't fake any of this stuff. Like, you can try to fake some of this stuff, but it won't work very well because you have to make this stuff like a way of being, a part of your life. That I'm not just not criticizing and complaining because I want to get money from these people. I'm not just showing appreciation sincerely because I feel like I can get this person as a client. No, like, you have to make it a habit and do it to everyone. You have to do it to the waiter and the waitress and the person at the tire store and just like everybody. Because if you don't do it in general and embody it, then it won't become a natural part of who you are, so it won't feel authentic, number one. And number two, you just won't get enough reps in. You won't get enough practice so that when you need it, it won't be there as the reflexive way to deal with people. All right, let's keep on going. Likability issue number 5 is discuss the other person's interests. There's a great story in there about an older man who was talking to a young boy, like it was I forget if it was a niece or a nephew or like the son of a prospective client. And he was really interested in boats and he was trying to launch some boats in a little lake in a park. And he just asked the kid about boats and let the kid talk to him about boats. And he had a conversation with the kid about boats for like 20 minutes. And the kid went to his mother later and was like, that was like the coolest dude I've ever met in my life. And he knows so much about boats. And his mom was like, no, he doesn't. He's not like really into boats. He saw that you were into boats, so he let you talk about boats for a while. Boats are not one of his main interests at all. He was being nice. And it's not like he was just being nice. He was genuinely being nice. Because sometimes just like being a decent human being to others can be like one of the best things that happens in your day. And if you can approach your client interactions with that idea that being a decent person to other people can be one of the highlights of your day, oh my goodness, you're going to have great interactions with people. They're going to refer other people to you. And I'm not saying like this, like I'm some god at doing this, because I'm not. I should probably reread this book again soon, because when I was reading it again, it was kicking my butt and making me realize all these missed opportunities and all these times where I could have been nicer to my wife or one of my clients or whoever. And it makes me want to bang myself over the head with this book of like, why you gotta be such a jerk sometimes? None of us are perfect. We all struggle with the same stuff, which is why we need reminders. And that's what this episode is about. Is this a weird episode for a pro audio channel? For those of you who have stuck with me long enough to get this far. Tell me, how weird is this? And is it useful weird or just crazy weird Justin stop doing this? The Justin stop doing this people probably aren't here this long, so we're not going to get their comments. But let me know if you have gotten this far just because you like appeasing me for some strange reason, and you want me to stop doing it. All right, and the sixth big way to make people like you, number 6, is make the other person feel important. And this is that idea of like, it doesn't have to be your idea that wins. And even if it is your idea that wins, and the people around you don't acknowledge it, but your actions made them feel important and special, and like even subconsciously, there's a part of them that's associating that with you, it makes you more likable to not be like, oh, you liked that idea, right? We remember whose idea that was. Yeah, that was me. But like if they know in their heart of hearts that like it kind of came from something that you did or said, and you're like, that is a great idea. You're right, we should do it. Like without even a hint of like, oh, that was really me. Like there's this part of them that kind of recognizes that. But there's other ways to make people feel important. Like just taking a moment to not be like, I'm the engineer guy who knows how records should sound. And if you legit go to your clients and you say, like, I have a bunch of good ways of getting from point A to point B. That's what I'm really good at. And I have a whole bunch of ways to get to. I've listened to so many records in here. I know how these sounds are made. But that doesn't mean like I should know how your record should sound. Like you also know how your record should sound. And whenever we're not sure, we should just double check and just refresh ourselves by listening to records you really like and make sure we're going in the right direction. Like you are valuing their opinion on what their record should sound like as much or more than your own. If you're doing that, that's going to make them feel important. And it's going to make you more likable. But it's also going to help you make better sounding records that the clients are more satisfied with. Now I get it. Sometimes we feel like the client is wrong, right? And this is a question sometimes I get, like, how do you deal with it, Justin? I just did an episode recently where I was telling people, about, hey, here's some common beginner mistakes in the mix. Here are things that you shouldn't do. And someone wrote in saying, yeah, but like, what if the client wants to do all those bad, wrong things that you're saying not to do in the mix? And like, they're steering me to making worse mix. And we've all been there, right? Where we feel like we really know what's best for the client. They don't. And now we're fighting them because it's like, no, I'm just trying to make your record sound better, dude. And all of your ideas suck and they're making it sound worse. And it's almost like you're just saying these just so you can feel like the important person. Hold the phone for a second. What if you made them feel like an important person from moment one? Maybe they wouldn't be fighting you on all of this stuff. If you made them feel important right out of the gate, they wouldn't necessarily need to like shove down your throat how important they are and how important their ideas are. And maybe because you showed them how important you consider their ideas and their perspective, they're a little bit more open because it's already been established that you respect their ideas and that you're there in their corner trying to help them and not just trying to beat them. So now we get into the final area of how to not do all of this stuff, how to actually criticize people, how to actually persuade people that your way is better, and how to, like, quote unquote, get your way more when you know that you're right or whatever, without making other people hate you, and while still being likable in the studio, and while still having smooth interactions, pleasurable interactions with your clients. And that's what part 3 of this book is about. And the very first one, major principle here, is to avoid heated arguments, is to avoid the kind of emotion and irritation that I'm hamming up right now because I'm trying to make this an engaging podcast episode. Like, that isn't the tone of voice I would take at a person who I want to persuade to see things more my way, or who I want to help by having them accept an idea that I have that I really think is going to help them. You have to do it, first of all, the first layer is to be dispassionate and to get your own sense of self and sense of ego out of this debate. So that's principle number 1. There's a whole chapter on it. But then the next chapter is about doing one better than that and having a friendly approach, beginning in a friendly way when there's a disagreement about how things should go, rather than beginning in a critical way. And this is so big. And one of the ways that you begin in a friendly way and you avoid a heated argument is first, like, help make their case for them. First, show that you understand what they want and maybe why they want it and why it might be a good idea. Like, if you want to contradict or criticize or flip the script or flip the goals around, and you want to do that effectively with very little friction, first make their case for them. And this ties into, there's a whole third chapter around the idea of respect the other person's opinions. Like, again, demonstrate to them that what they're going for is valid and you understand why. So, for instance, if someone has really big tom fills, really big kick drum sound, and you feel like it's hurting the record because it's a little bit overdone, you can start with, like, those sound awesome. And it's true, like, I totally get what you're going for here. Like, that kick drum thing is so big. And those tom fills sound absolutely gorgeous. The spread on them is great. But I'm wondering, my only problem with it is I'm wondering if I'm losing the vocal and the bass line a little bit, and if those are more important. And if they're distracting from what might be more central here. So are there ways where we can, like, establish that bigness in another section and then not have them overwhelm the vocal and the bass in this section where they should be more important? And when you first, like, make their case for them, oh, it helps so much. The other way to more easily win arguments, which you're probably never going to do, because when it comes to matters of taste, like, there aren't rights and wrongs, there are opinions. And either you're going to lose the argument because the person just puts up a wall and, like, they just are never going to accept your position because now we're entrenched. Or maybe you'll somehow, like, beat them over the head so much that they accepted what you're going with, but they don't really like it, and now they like you less too. And future interactions are going to have a hint of those past battles in them. So one of these other ways to make it easier when these things happen is when you're wrong or you make a mistake or you're wrong about something admit it quickly and like almost effusively and like own up to it immediately and like lavish on how right they were. Like, don't be disgruntled when someone got their way and it really did serve things better. Like, make note of it. Do the things that people aren't doing for you, potentially. Be like, oh, man, your idea works so much better. I thought it was going to work better my way, but you're 100% right. Like, go out of your way. Say that if you really believe that it's working better. Don't just be like, oh, fine, okay, the next one I'm going to get. No! All right, those last a couple major principles here is, again, when you're having an argument, instead of talking at the person about why your way is right, first let them talk. Let them completely explain and justify why they're going for what they're going for. Sometimes people have arguments because they don't feel heard. Like, this is the realities of dealing with people. Half the time people argue with people, it's not because they're actually disagreeing about something factual, and they're maybe not even actually that invested in the outcome. The reason they're arguing is because they don't feel heard and they don't feel respected. But if you let the other person talk, let them make their case, and even possibly get them to a spot where they can make your case for you, super powerful. And there's great stories in the book about that. The other ones here, number 6, see things from the other person's point of view. Now we're starting to repeat each other. These principles start to become repetitive. It's almost rephrasing of earlier principles in the book. But legitimately trying to like be in their shoes and make their case for them, super big. Number 7, closely related, sympathize with the other person. Let them know about times that you felt the same way. Number 8 principle here for arguments is start with the things that you agree on. List all the things that you have in common. Like, list all the strides you've made together so far. Or, like, if you have a difference in opinion about how the bass should sound, you think it should be brighter, they should think it should be darker. And they're worried that it's going to be, too shrill and too thin, and they want to make sure it has big bottom, but you feel like it needs more definition and clarity than where it is. Like, just first of all saying that, like, yeah, I actually have the same fear that if we go too bright with this, all of a sudden we're getting into this like 90s fusion bass sound, and it just wouldn't sit right with this record. So you're 100% right. We have to avoid that. But I feel like there's this issue of kind of tubbiness and where the bass might not translate to other systems. So do you think there's a way that we can maybe add definition and clarity to this thing without it getting too shrill and too bright like you're worried about? Because I'm worried about that happening too. Man, who's not going to play around with sounds that are slightly brighter now with you than someone that you've just made that case with? All of a sudden, like, oh, you totally get it. And we're afraid of the same things. We agree on directions it shouldn't go. Let's play around and let's see how far we push it before it accidentally goes there and how far before we pull back. And then all of a sudden, we're not having arguments, we're having collaborations. Number 9 in how to make arguments when you have differences of opinion go smoother is let them own your idea. We talked about this one, so I'm not going to go into it much more. Number 11 is make your ideas vivid. And I think that's a big one. Telling stories. I've only put, if I was going to do a better job on this episode, honestly, I would do such a better job of having more stories for each one of these points. But I honestly can't rewrite this book in a single 1-hour setting. We're reaching close to 1 hour now. This little psychology masterclass based on a book. I'm not even the master. I'm telling you things that I should be doing better myself. Number 11, make your ideas vivid. Number 12, issue a challenge. I'm not going to go into great detail on all of these because we're getting up to the hour mark. But then there's a whole other section here about starting criticism with praise, about pointing out your mistakes, about asking people questions instead of ordering them around, about finding ways to preserve someone's pride when you want things to go in your direction. Like, how can you let them save face while deciding to go in the direction that you're recommending that they go? How can you make it look easy to improve things instead of make them feel bad about where things currently are? Oh man, I wish I could do another hour and just talk the same detail about this whole section about giving people feedback and criticism, because this whole they have a couple more here. It's so good. Praise every improvement. Oh man, such an awesome thing to do in the studio. Whenever you know that a take could be better, and then you finally got the better take, or you knew a sound could be better and you finally got the better sound out of them, be like, awesome. Like, you got to be like a little bit of a cheerleader in the studio. You're really trying to make them have a good time and bring the best out of them. And the only way to do that is to bring the best out of yourself. And a book like this forces you to be positive and forces you to be, for lack of a better word, nice. Now, the last note I want to give, man, I could talk about the stuff in this book for like 2 or 3 more hours. Like, I almost want to read the entire book to you. That's how important I think stuff like this is for people who work like us in a client service business. You absolutely have to have your technical skills on point. But at a certain point, your technical skills are only going to take you so far. And internalizing the ideas in a book like this one is going to help bridge those technical skills into business skills that create a whole career, because people are going to be, they're going to want to be around you. They're going to want to work with you. And this is not to manipulate people. So this is the last basic ideas I want to give here is, one, this is not manipulating, number one. And this is not, another popular word for the kids these days, simping. When I'm encouraging you to be nice, it's not to be nice expecting something in return or expecting that you're entitled to good treatment because you're trying to enact the principles in a book like this one. Because people will sometimes say, like, yeah, I tried to be nice and then I got jaded on that crap. A girl dumped me because I was too nice, and now I have to be a bad boy and a jerk, and people really respect jerks, and it's really jerks that make it to the top. Or, dude, all this stuff, yeah, sounds nice, but you know what? I'm a really disagreeable person, and it would just pain me, make me like, it'd be like vomit inducing to me to do all this stuff. Well, a couple things there. One, if you're a disagreeable, brash person, like me, you need this book more than anybody. Because if you have the cojones, the testicular fortitude, for lack of a better term, or what other piece of anatomy, because there are brash men and women out there. If you are a brash person of any kind, and you have that ability to say no and to stand your ground and to not be pushed around, and then you couple that with the ability to be pleasant and charming, you have all the superpowers in the world. You have like, you can be a CEO now. Because that's what it is. It's the ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that. To be firm, to stand your ground, to not enter into situations that you don't want to be in, to not take crap from anybody, but to also be able to do that with a smile and to make the interactions around you more frictionless. And there are exceptions to this. There are people, you hear about successful jerks. And it's not like this never happens. But often being a jerk isn't what got them to their initial success. And often just being around people who really want something from you. Like, you're now the money giver and the job giver and the fame giver and all this stuff. And you can start getting away with being a jerk. I really think that being a jerk comes after. Like, it comes before. People start out as jerks. They learn how to actually be nice and charming and get along with people and have low friction relationships. And then they potentially develop back into jerks because they're in a position where they don't have to remember all this stuff all the time. Again, because they have enough success coming to them without doing that stuff. Or sometimes you all will run into people who have what would literally be considered personality disorders, like sociopaths who can master putting some of this stuff on for a moment, but none of it's genuine. And they'll flash in and out of both modes. And they might use these strategies laterally and upwards, but then to make up for it, do the exact opposite downwards. And as soon as they can stab someone in the back, do. But I think in the entertainment industry, yes, there are sociopaths in it. There's sociopaths in every industry. And white collar sociopaths can actually do fairly well in life and sometimes have, nice returns on investment for learning some social skills. But they are still a minority of people, even at the higher levels of stuff. It is not true that everyone at the highest levels of any given industry is a sociopath. What is true is that we all have our own interests at heart. You have your own interests at heart. The people you're dealing with have their own interests at heart. But coming to the rational realization that the best way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want, that's what being nice is about. To a degree, there is this, is it calculated? No, but there is this reality that you have to recognize that if you want what you want, you've got to find out how to give other people what they want. And you can't expect other people to start doing this stuff to you. You have to start doing it to them. And then by being the kind of person who does this stuff, you literally influence the behavior of people around you by being a little bit of a role model, I guess, of being an example. But you also end up filtering out of your life the people who don't want to play along. The problem clients get more and more filtered out of your life because you're surrounded all of a sudden by so many decent people who are fun to work with that, like, you don't really need the problem clients anymore and you can fire them. And you can just say, no thanks, to situations you don't want to be in. And rather than tearing up the stuff in the book when you deal with a jerk and be a jerk back to them, you have to stay in that practice of, as much as I'd love to be a jerk, and it would feel really good for like a moment, and then like I'd seethe for another day or two, and I'd go to these dark places. As much as that's in all of us, if you start that practice, it spirals. Just as this stuff spirals. So I hope some of this stuff was useful to you. Let me know if it was. I've got to tell you, this is almost a therapy session for myself, talking through this stuff, as much as I hope it's useful to you. And let me know in the comments or the live chat down below, have you read this book? Has it changed your life? Can you give me a story, if you want to, of one of the worst client interactions you've ever had that was your fault and how you did it wrong? Or what was one of the times you kept yourself from having one of the worst possible client interactions and you saved yourself at the last minute by remembering some principles like this? So as always, I want to encourage you guys to work on your technical skills. Things like mixing breakthroughs can dramatically improve the way that you mix, right? And this is not just me pitching the course. This is not the plug section. I have Mastering Demystified, compression breakthroughs. Mostly we talk about techniques and strategies to mix better, but they will only take you so far. I have a whole video that's really popular on how much you can charge clients and how much you should be charging your clients. But the reality is, you can charge way more, way sooner if you get this stuff right. And getting this stuff right will put you in the position to get better sooner because more people will want to collaborate with you sooner, so you get more reps in on audio engineering and music production. But I remember talking to one client, he was like, how much should I charge for a mix? Right now I'm charging like 100, 150 bucks. Can I break into that next tier of, 250 bucks and up? And I was listening to this stuff and I'm like, honestly, you're getting to a place where you could charge $500 for a mix right now. Maybe even $700 for a mix right now, if you knew people who were willing to pay that much. And this guy was really second guessing himself. I don't know people who can pay that much. So it's like, okay, what's standing between you and your ability to get better work is not the quality of your work at this point. it's the quality of your network and your social interactions. You'll be able to give yourself a raise, not by buying a better compressor, not by buying a better microphone, not even by learning how to mix better, but by working on this side of yourself and increasing your network. I had another coaching call with another guy who was more on the production side. He was charging $500 to produce a song, taking a songwriter who had kind of written a song, but then filling out all the instrumentation, recording all the stuff with them, recording their vocals, coaching them through the vocal sessions, mixing the whole thing. And he was charging them $500 for this. And I heard the quality of the songs and I was like, stop. Immediately, you should be charging at least $2,000 for a song. Minimum $2,000 for a song for the kind of producing that you're doing. He's like, well, the two clients I've gotten so far to do this work with, they almost balked at $500. It's like, well, okay, cool. You've got to meet new people. Because there's other people out there who are more than happy to pay $2,000 or more for a song. You don't know those people yet, but the skills are there. The skills aren't what's holding you back. And he was worried, like, oh, I'm charging $500. I'm making so little. How can I pay a mastering engineer $150 to master my track at a really good quality when it's, I'm paying $500? Well, stop charging $500. Start charging $2,000 and bake other things in. Heck, now you can bake in, when you're charging $2,000, bake in having someone else mix it and just focus more on the side of actually doing the part where you excel, the producing and arranging and, vocalist coaching. Focus on that side of things. And it's also freed up bandwidth to focus on the idea of expanding your network and reaching out to new clients. If all of a sudden every project you're doing, you don't have to mix the thing and master the thing, you've just freed up what? If you're taking my advice in the Mixing Breakthroughs course, you're mixing in 4 to 8 hours, so you've saved all that stuff. If you're taking my advice in Mastering Demystified, you're mastering a track in under an hour. So you've just freed up, 5 to 9 hours where you could be doing additional networking. And if you're not taking my advice, you're spending, 3 weeks on the mix and 2 days on the master. So you've just freed up all that time if you haven't bought my courses already. So this is time you could now be using to expand the network, to figure out like a marketing scheme of like, what does my ideal client look like? Who are the people who I've successfully worked in the past? How will I connect with these people? And it's going to free up bandwidth to do that. So at a certain point, when you get good enough, you need to put more effort into this side of things. Your soft skills in the studio and your client outreach. Man, there's so many great chats coming here. Justin just said simping. That's one of them. Man, I'm going to have to read all of your chats now that Bernardo Reyes asks, is sandwich making considered a hard skill or a soft skill? Man, it's a good question. In the context of the studio, it's a soft skill. In the context of cookery, it's a hard skill. Now, if you want to be a member of the channel, I'd heavily encourage you to do that because we are going to be going super deep on actual mix feedback and getting the technical side right, because you also need to continue improving on the technical side. I'm not saying just throw away your technical development and only focus on this stuff, but we do have a mix feedback session, and I think some of the best ways to get good mix feedback and to hear someone criticize you directly who has criticized so many people and made them feel happy by the criticism. This is one skill I have taken away from this. I do coaching calls regularly, and I want my coaching clients to be repeat clients. And my whole job on the coaching call, right, to a degree, is to criticize them. People like literally ask me like, be blunt, tell me everything that's wrong. And I do. I tell people exactly everything that I think could be improved. But I try to keep all these principles in mind. So just even me giving you the feedback, this is one thing I've taken from this book that I think I do reliably well in my coaching sections, is how to make people accept the advice, because I'm looking for what's good in what they're doing, highlighting that stuff first, getting on the same page with understanding how they really want this thing to sound, and then helping them figure out how to get there. And this is the exact same kind of stuff you have to do with your mixing clients, with your mastering clients, with the artists you work with in the studio. And if you want to be in on these critique sessions, where we're trying to give each other constructive criticism and trying to create that positive environment. Check it out. Hit the join button down below. Our next mixed feedback session is coming this month. They're absolutely epic, and you will learn a tremendous amount, not just from hearing some of the before and afters that I do and some of the specific advice I give and some of the specific reference comparisons we do on your own music, but you also get a tremendous amount from it hearing it on other people's music. Some of our great members who are here today, like Ant-Man Felix, Music 7 Studios, who else is here? Skeleton Pete is here, Tortugula Productions. So all of these great folks. And I got to tell you, the caliber of music that people are doing that they bring into these mixed feedback sessions is amazing. We have some really, I'm not just saying this to do all the stuff in the book. Like, honestly, we have some people who are doing really tremendous work, who are tremendous assets and great people to get to know. So I'd encourage you to become a member if you've gotten this far in the podcast. But also we have some people who are just starting out. And to hear their stuff transform from one session to another, I think is going to be brilliant for you guys to experience as well. Now, last but not least, man, I've talked so long that now I can't talk anymore. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. Most important sponsor is you. Check out one of our full-length courses, become a member, etc. Mixing breakthroughs, compression breakthroughs, mastering demystified. Best way to sponsor the podcast if you've gotten this far. But also check out the Pure Tube from Lewitt. I'm talking into it right now. Absolutely gorgeous tube microphones just come out. Tremendous build quality. I would really put this Lewitt stuff up to some of the most expensive mics out there. The build quality is insane. The sound is really good. And they just have this great balance of taking little cues from classic designs, but really making them modern. They're not trying to specifically emulate a U47 or a U87 or anything, but they make great sounding mics. This one particularly, I think, just sounds good on vocals out of the box. And this one here, Sound Toys, other big thing to check out. Big sale going on from these guys right now. Legit one of my favorite plugin makers in the known universe. They have the most fun stuff out there, and it's 40% off right now off their entire bundle, or 50% off their new Reverb Super Plate, which has an amazing tweak section, which has this ducking feature for reverb that you're going to love. It's going to let you get away with longer reverb times that you'd ordinarily use. Really, really cool tool. And then there's so much stuff. If I had to pick my favorites that I feel like you should get, everyone says Decapitator, so I'm not going to say Decapitator. Echo Boy, I think, is the delay that everybody needs to have. Filter Freak, one of my favorites. But I would say the biggest ones for me, I absolutely love Devilock and Devilock Deluxe. These are like some of the craziest crushing effects ever. And also the Micro Shift. Those would probably be some of my top picks if you're looking at individual plugins, and a whole bunch of them are on sale as cheap as $39 right now. Pan Man, Tremolator, oh, Crystallizer, it's another great one. How could I leave it off? Lovely tools. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. I said I was going to go for a half an hour, but I got so cooking that we went for almost an hour and 20 minutes. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you've gotten this far with me, oh, Lord bless you. You're an amazing person for putting up with my yammering. If you did get this far, let me know if it was enough yammering for you, exactly the right amount, too much or too little. Thanks for hanging out with me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. This has been Justin Coletti of SonicScoop. See you next time.